Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Kari and I'm a funeral director and embalmer in Michigan. And this series of videos is to give you a glimpse into the daily life and what the funeral directors and embalmers across the country and in parts of the world are experiencing during the pandemic right now. So today we will be interviewing two more embalmers from across the country, and one in Arizona and one in Indiana. So take a listen. So hey everyone, we are here with Monica Torres. Monica, I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself and where you're at in the country and kind of your role and what you're doing.
Hi, Kari. Hi, everyone that's watching. Thank you so much for taking interest in our industry and the people that are working as last responders. My name is Monica. Like Kari said, I am a funeral director. I'm also an embalmer, and I live in Arizona. So we're out here in the desert.
And you're with Next Generation Mortuary Support. So you do trade embalming.
Yes, I do. I have a mortuary support company. What my company does is it supports funeral homes and offers consulting services to families as well.
And then you also have a YouTube channel and a podcast to go along with it called Cold Hands Hosts.
I have a YouTube channel, yes, and I try to definitely, be active on social media for my clients and families, trying to create a little bit of a platform for education as far as embalming is concerned and the values of open casket viewing and preparing our loved ones.
Perfect. So we're talking COVID-19 for the most part today and kind of front line of the funeral business during this time. So what have been your encounters? Have you been caring for those who have died with a diagnosis of COVID-19, or has your caseload increased? Kind of what's going on right now with you in the business?
Yeah, so here in Arizona, it's been surprisingly, at least for my company, I can't speak for other funeral directors, but it's been kind of quiet as far as COVID-19 is concerned. Our state, I think, is kind of a little bit behind the rest of the country. At least what I've heard is that we're about 3 weeks behind everyone else.
Okay.
However, I did have my first case last week that I was called in to embalm. Keep in mind also, I want to point it out, Arizona is one of the highest rates for cremation in the country. So I think that is important to point out for people.
Okay. So in this case that you cared for, how were you alerted to the diagnosis? Did the family tell the funeral home this and they passed it on, or was it something in the hospital? Do you know? Like, how is that information getting passed over?
Right. So from what I understand is this particular case was taken to a funeral home, and that funeral home either could not or would not serve the family. So because of the diagnosis, and so the family did know. So they reached out to their funeral home. That funeral home took in the body, but as you know, many funeral homes on any given day, even besides the pandemic, are understaffed. And so, that's always been kind of an issue in our industry, is there's not very many morticians just around in general. So they called me in for support. They needed a little bit of help to get the processing done. Right now, we're basically closing down the prep room. When we get a case like that, we close down the prep room, limit the amount of people that are in the prep room to limit exposure. And there's a process. So that prep room is being utilized sometimes, maybe 3, 4, 5 hours, depending on the case, the circumstances, and it's definitely different. Let me just put it that way.
Well, because we have to treat these individuals as highly contagious, quarantine them when they get in the building, along with us if we're exposed to them. So it does definitely a lot.
And the family.
Focus, yes.
So it forces us to have those difficult conversations with the family, which is kind of good, because I think it's opening up that conversation for funeral directors to have with families, so that they understand that we do deal with infectious disease, not just COVID-19, but that what we do in our prep rooms is handling other infectious diseases as well.
Right. Yeah, we encounter a lot of things. That's what I keep getting asked. Are you scared about this? Are you scared about this? I'm like, there's other viruses and things that I think I'm more terrified of than COVID-19. But it's just because of the fear, I think, that's been instilled across the board. There is a bit of a fear of it, but I'm like, there's still things that rank way higher above on my list.
I agree.
I don't want to be exposed to. So.
I agree. And as a matter of fact, my own family was really concerned for me, and I had to have that really kind of difficult conversation with them and say, hey, you guys, and they really do pay attention to what I do. It's an open conversation in my family.
Yeah.
But I had to remind them that, number one, I'm a professional. This is my vocation. I have the skills, the equipment to handle these cases, and there's nowhere I feel safer than in the prep room, because I have the education and understanding of what I'm dealing with and what I'm doing. And I know that our prep rooms as embalmers, if we have all of our PPEs, really are the safest place. I mean, it's a chemical war zone in there. So
right.
I feel like I have...
You're sanitizing left and right. And
yes,
down.
Absolutely. I feel like I have the chemical warfare that I need to fight this war, probably better than anybody else that's dealing with these bodies.
I mean, with only handling one individual that had a positive diagnosis that you know of, because I think, as everybody's been saying, we've probably handled cases multiple times now that have probably had this and we just didn't know. But did you notice anything different in terms of embalming? Because I've been hearing that there are differences with these deceased. So what was your take, even though it was only on one deceased?
I did, after I embalmed the case, I did journal it, and I did reach out to some of, my colleagues as well. And I did let them know, hey, this is what I experienced. For the most part, I think it's important to note that this particular body that I cared for was definitely within the age range of the people that are being affected. And also the fact that this person already had underlying medical issues. So I think that's important to note as well, is that diabetes is a big factor. And I also noticed there were differences within the respiratory system. Without being too graphic, I did notice, there was a little more excessive purge than normal, but I wouldn't say it was anything different than I've seen before. What I did notice that was different was when I made the incision, I did notice that internally the man's body had begun to break down already. So, typically when we open that incision up, we can see everything, the vessels, and everything is, pretty clear. If you're skilled enough that you don't pop a vein, right? But I did notice that difference. So I can't say for sure. I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't say for sure if that was something that happened naturally with the body. It could have also been that this body had been deceased for a while, was refrigerated for a while, had been in and out of the cooler, transferred to different locations. All those are factors in the case, but I did notice that was something different. It was remarkable to me, and I did make note of it on my embalming report.
Because I would imagine, a lot of these individuals are dying after stays at the hospital. We do notice across the board individuals, when they've been in the hospital for a while, we get edema, we get high levels of moisture within the body, and especially when the lungs are filled with so much excessive moisture that I think a lot of people are seeing. We have that kind of all to battle, which breaks down the body faster, and in and out of the cooler, like you said, is always going to be detrimental. So now I know that you and I had a conversation about embalming reports, and it was something, because you said you kind of chronicled what you had done embalming, and I hadn't really thought about this, but the epidemiology loving side of me should have thought about this, that down the road, as this virus is being studied by virologists and epidemiologists and everyone, our documentation of handling these deceased can definitely come into play. So how important
Yes.
is that embalming report for the future?
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because this is something that I've been talking about during my educational presentations for a while now. And I can't stress how important it is that we're creating documentation on all the bodies.
Nice.
Not just
no, I know that. So the third thing I really wanted to point at, because it has been such a big topic in the news and in the media, but it's not coming focused on funeral homes and protecting us as much, is the personal protective equipment and the PPE. And there is a shortage right now, as everyone is saying. Everyone's kind of fighting over it. And so we are the ones handling the deceased and handling all deceased, whether they're dying. People are still dying of AIDS. They're still dying of, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease right now. They're still dying of every virus, every bacteria, everything out there. And we are right now not as able to protect ourselves as we should be able, because there is a shortage of PPE across the board. So tell me, like, two most important PPE items that you have in your arsenal that you would rather go without everything else, but you want 2 items. What would they be?
Yeah, the 2 items, at least for me personally, my number 1 is my respirator, my full face respirator, and nitrile gloves. Well, my respirator has been important to me for a while, not just recently.
Right.
I'm one of the few professionals that I know in my community who uses it very regularly. I use it anytime I'm embalming, but especially with really difficult and hard cases where I'm using really caustic chemicals. But now it's really become one of the best investments that I've ever made in my career. And I have it right here. I'm going to put some gloves on because I saved my respirator to clean here with you. It's been bagged in a bag. After I removed my respirator the last time that I used it, I put it in a plastic bag, and I kept it there until it's ready to be cleaned. So I actually have it right here, and I'll show you. This is Susie. She's my bestie, and I have had her for a while. But I would say, the one thing that's really important to remember about these respirators is they have to remain in a bag. So you can't just hang them out. If they're exposed to just the air, they're working. So she's working right now, even though I'm holding her and I'm not breathing into her. So these cartridges are sensitive to that. So they need to be saved or sealed in a bag.
Okay.
So basically, it's really kind of easy. They come off, they just twist, these cartridges. Keep in mind the cartridges should not be submerged in any type of disinfectant or anything like that. They should only be wiped down. So I'm going to set these aside. And you can see that I don't know if you guys can see, but I have plastic on my prep table. And the reason I've done that is to basically contain any type of contagion or spread of the virus, if it is on my mask or any of my implements or anything. I just want to be able to wrap that up and toss it out. So the other thing that I have on my table that you guys can't see here is an extra set of gloves. As we know, sometimes we're working and our glove will rip. So, try to contain the contagion and the spread by having the things that you need out before you take your respirator out of the bag to disinfect it. Okay. And so this gently, there's a little snap. I don't know if you can see, but there's a little snap here that you just simply pull off, and it's going to expose that breathing particle. So this part is going to be disinfected and sanitized, and then also the inside right here, this just pulls out. Okay. And the straps themselves don't necessarily come off, but you can move the straps and clean them, if you have to with the toothbrush or whatnot. I'm going to show you what I have and how I'm cleaning my respirator just very quickly. I don't know how much time we have, but I've actually concocted my own disinfecting wipes with the EPA approved standards on the CDC website, which is 5 tablespoons of bleach to 1 gallon of water, I believe.
Perfect.
And so what I did was I basically put my paper towel in there. I cut it in half and I put paper towel in there in the solution, so that I have these paper towels now. So this is, and I think this, a lot of funeral homes are at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping somebody sees this video and sees how, you know, we're really struggling, that we don't have the things that we need to be able to take care of ourselves. So I'm trying to be creative here. And on the back, I put removal van, so that, you know, I know that this is only for the van COVID cases and cleaning and disinfecting my infected items.
Well, cool. Thank you, Monica. I appreciate the information, and thank you for your fight on the front line, as we're saying.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you to all of, you know, my colleagues and the people that are really like in the middle of all of this, that are really facing
the epicenters. Yeah.
Death. They're facing death every day. Like we face death every day, right? But they're facing death on a whole different level, and now it's affecting their families in a different way that as last responders we're really not used to. So, you know, my thoughts and prayers go out to all of them, and thank you for creating this video and creating awareness for our industry. I love all your videos.
Well, hey everyone, I am here with Wally Hooker, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and where he works as a funeral director and embalmer. So where are you at in our country, Wally?
Good morning. I am about 80 miles northwest of Indianapolis, Indiana, in a little community of Wingate, Indiana.
Perfect. So you're a small town guy.
Small town guy. We're just about a 20-minute drive from the Purdue University campus, just for perspective, for people to understand where we're actually at. Right out in the rich farm fields of Fountain and Montgomery County, Indiana.
Perfect. So today we're going to be talking about embalming and handling of the deceased. So tell me a little bit about your exposure to COVID-19 deceased right now during this time. Have you had much in your area? What's been going on?
You know, I'm actually chief deputy coroner in our county as well. So we've been preparing for this for a couple of months, as well as at the funeral home. We were pretty well prepared with PPEs. We haven't had any problem really accessing what we've needed. I always tried to keep a good supply on hand because we run a significant amount of trade embalming through our funeral home. And so even when this hit, I thought we should be a little more prepared, and any order that I've placed, I've been able to receive what we've needed, surprisingly so, because I hear from other parts of the country where things are in such short supply. But from my perspective or my standpoint, our county has only had 2 deaths from COVID-19. We've handled only 1 COVID death here at my funeral home. And I just, as I said, we do quite a bit of trade work for my funeral home, and I have to utilize a couple of trade embalmers on occasion. And I reached out to both of them last night and this morning, and just to see how many COVID cases that they have prepared. And one of them calls on or covers for 20 funeral homes, and he had only encountered 2, and that's in a large area that goes clear down to Terre Haute, down by Bloomington, Indiana, and clear up almost to Lafayette. And he's only encountered 2. And one of the other embalmers that I use, she works in the Indianapolis area. And just before we went on, she sent me a text and said she was just preparing her 6th one. And those were just between April 1st and today that she's actually had COVID-19 cases. Now, I stopped to visit another friend who's in a large funeral home with a large prep center in Indianapolis on Monday. I had to go to the health department to retrieve death certificates, so I just stopped to say hello. And they had been overrun as well. I think she said they may have in the past week had 50 that were either COVID-19 or COVID-19 positive.
Wow.
And it seems like if they have it, they're listing that on the death certificate. And obviously, we've got to be careful and treat each case as though it is potentially dangerous. And so they've been overrun. But when you have these larger firms, if you will, that have a central prep, and they're preparing bodies, if we will, for remote locations, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 other locations, it's not unusual, or for me, I don't think it's unusual that they would be extra busy just now. But yeah, the burden's on them. They're working smart. They're diligent, and I know them all well, and they're doing a great job.
Now, do you know, in a lot of those cases, how are they finding out the COVID-19 diagnosis or confirmation? Is it coming from the hospital, from the family? Is the medical examiner, or in your area, you know, in your state, coroners getting involved where they're having to do any kind of postmortem for the deceased that they're investigating more? What are your experience in that?
The case that I had, I don't want to get into any kind of political debate, but
Yeah.
he's been hospitalized for 48 days between
Wow.
a hospital in Indianapolis. And as I said, that was about 80 miles from our home county here. And then he'd been in a rehab facility, and it was nothing to do with respiratory problems. He'd had some significant health issues, heart issues, kidney issues. He was moved from the rehab facility on Monday. They checked him for COVID-19. He went to the hospital, I believe, Monday evening, and he passed Wednesday morning from a collapsed lung. That's why he was there. He did not want to be put on a ventilator. He had a DNR. He had some other issues going on. But when I received the death certificate, it was signed off as COVID-19, and the family wasn't particularly happy about that because they didn't believe that it was. But however, we can't argue with the doctor. The frontline doctors, they have to make their decision. I'm not second guessing them at all.
Right.
I don't want anyone to, but as just a funeral director and a coroner, I'm trying to second guess a doctor. But as a coroner, we're mindful. We have 2 cases right now that we're waiting to hear results back. These take about 6 days to get them back. So if the receiving funeral home has questions, we just encourage them to treat it as though it is a positive case, and you'll make sure you're safe. And that's the best we have at this time, because we don't have that immediate test available to us out here.
Right. It's not
But when we made the removal
in and doing the
I was
test.
talking about, yes. So
Go ahead.
the gentleman I was talking about, the hospital actually notified us when they made the death notification. And then after that, I called the family and asked them, and they were totally astounded that that was the diagnosis of the doctor. But as a coroner as well and funeral director, I think it's important, you know, we're always careful not to offend families or hurt their feelings, because we know they're going through something very, very difficult. We want to make their life easier, not more difficult. But I'm encouraging everyone, if you have a hospice call, a home death called in by hospice, or a nursing home death, it's okay to ask the family. If they were tested for COVID-19, it's okay to ask the family if they've been exposed before we meet them face to face. Some funeral homes are still meeting families face to face. And as we go out there as members of the coroner's office, we don't have a choice whether we go into someone's home or not.
Right.
And if I'm dispatched, I ask dispatch if they will please ask the family what the background is, if they've been hospitalized. And we need to ask those important questions to keep not only ourselves safe, our funeral homes, and the communities we serve. It's a different kind of situation out there right now.
Right. What we would have done previously to be more gentle and maybe more conscious of families' feelings and such, we have to be a little more forthcoming. And I think families are understanding in some situations. Hey, we've got to come in with a mask where we might not have before, and such. Now, what are you hearing back in terms of prep and in terms of doing embalming with deceased who have had COVID-19 as a cause of death or a contributing cause of death? Any difference with what you've experienced, what you're hearing from other embalmers, that there's maybe a commonality that they're encountering with maybe a problem or something during the embalming?
You know, I communicate with a lot of embalmers across the country
Mhm.
because I've become friends with them through social media on the embalming sites. I've lectured across the country, and I like to stay in touch and see what's going on. And I consult with a lot of people. So it's interesting you asked the question because I've had a couple of people reach out to me and indicate that they were having significant problems establishing drainage during an embalming.
Mm.
I hadn't encouraged that and encountered that, and most of the funeral directors I've reached out to haven't. But there have been a few that have indicated there was a problem with drainage. So I think that perhaps it could be the meds that they were on in the hospital, because when the body is injected with meds, IV meds, whatever it may be, they build up nitrogenous waste in the cells, and that just kind of inhibits formaldehyde from doing its job, and it causes things, apparently some problems with clotting and drainage. So I can't answer that scientifically, but I just,
Right.
from those that I've spoken to, there have been a few cases where that's a problem.
Well, and my guess would be if you're in the hospital for a long time, as we see with anybody who's in the hospital, we get edema, fluid buildup, things of that nature. So I would imagine those are some things that we're up against as well as embalmers with a lot of these individuals that have been in a hospital type setting and on IVs and things long term, where I've heard a lot of skin slip starting from kind of some of the chatter amongst embalmers as well, just because of that fluid and edema buildup. But
Could I answer to the skin slip what
sure.
we've discovered? I've been with the coroner's office almost 30 years.
Hmm.
And we have found that when a warm body is taken to a cold morgue and placed into a body bag, and that body bag is zipped, it's a perfect environment to create problems for the body, especially skin slip. And even though we're trying to keep these bodies safe and double bagging and everything, that's a substantial problem that we have to face right now.
Well, you create that greenhouse humidity effect with
Yes.
sealing them in and placing them in the cooler right away. So,
Exactly. Yes.
and I'm imagining quicker than most, they're getting placed in a body bag, maybe right up the room where they die, and then being moved down. So it's containment much quicker. So I can see definitely where that would be problematic.
Some of the local hospitals and nursing homes in this area are asking us to bring an additional body bag because they want that body placed in another protective body pouch before it leaves their facility.
That's one question I keep getting asked by consumers on my channel is about PPE and if we're running into problems. I know you kind of touched on that you're pretty good where you're at. I've talked to some other embalmers. They're running out and they're limited on what they have and they're getting creative. But I know body bags has been a big question. Why is there a shortage of body bags? Can't we reuse these body bags? I said, if you ever tried to wash a body bag, you'd know that that's just a pain in itself. But could you touch on why we're using so many body bags and why there could be such a shortage?
And I can answer to that. Our coroner and the emergency management director in our county and the county health department we had 200 body pouches on hand because of the projections of what they thought the death rate could be in Fountain and Warren counties, which combined together and have a health department together. We ordered 200 more body pouches. I think there are a lot of areas that have ordered body pouches based on what the projections were that the death rate could be. And I think people have overbought, just like the toilet paper issue.
Right.
I think people have overbought, and it's put the people who really need these products in a bad spot.
Well, and they're being used, not just funeral directors. I mean, the hospitals are using them. And like you said, then if they're asking the funeral home to bring one, you've got this double usage going on. And there are different sorts. There's the heavy, those gray one, the silver ones with the handles. You've got the thin white ones. So there's all these different varieties that people are using. And they're getting used up. But like you said, some might have a stash back at their place,
Right.
keeping just in case they need them.
Well, in our county and the adjoining county, when those body pouches came in, the coroners actually delivered 10 body pouches to each funeral home just
Oh,
so
wow.
we had those in additional. They brought us PPEs just to our
Oh.
funeral homes, in addition to what I'm issued as a coroner and what I had on as a funeral director.
Well, thank you, Wally. I appreciate this conversation about caring for the deceased during this time.
Good to be with you.
Thanks. So a huge thank you to Monica and Wally for sharing a glimpse into what they are doing right now within their businesses to handle deceased, to help families, and to just maneuver through this time that we are all in together. Thanks so much to them. I'd like to close out our video today with some faces of those on the front line of the embalming and prep centers across the country during this pandemic. Thank you to everyone.